Have you ever wondered what sets great leaders apart from the rest? What secret principles do they follow that enable them to inspire, influence, and lead their teams to success? Well, welcome to Coach's Corner, where today we're diving deep into the wisdom of John Maxwell and uncovering some of the most profound leadership principles that can transform your approach to leading others. In this episode, which is titled Principles from My Mentor, Unlocking John Maxwell's Leadership Secrets, we will explore a few, not all of them, a few of the laws of leadership. These principles have been the cornerstones of many successful leadership journeys and have stood the test of time across various industries and settings. So, with that being said, let's kind of get after it. Garfield, I want to ask a question, not the question that we have posted, just kind of like a question, from you, because we both went through certification. We both are certified John Maxwell speakers, coach, and trainers. Like, if you don't mind sharing, like, from your perspective, what was it like, like during your certification process, like being in the room, being exposed to these people, so forth and so on. I just want to kind of put that out there before we get it started.
Are you talking about like at the actual conference?
Yep.
Oh man, I don't think I've ever had. I'm. I have never been around that many people at one time with similar mindsets and how can I put it? Like I've never been around that many people with that amount of high energy and that amount of people who are truly, you know what I mean, want to help. Like there, when you're there and you walk down the hallways or you walk in a hotel, people they was like, hey, you will speak to somebody and they are genuinely wanting to speak to you back. And you talk to people, you have conversation, and genuinely they're there trying to help you get better, trying to succeed, trying to be better. And when I went there, I've never experienced anything like that. It was one of the as far as like leadership conferences and different things like that, that was probably the most extravagant. Now I say all of that because I think sometimes that's how we get through the door, because sometimes if people are kind of crisp and they're not approachable, it's hard to get to the next step. But over there, because everybody was like that, I felt like everybody I talked to, I was going to get the same warming, welcoming, and everything like that. And it's like you want to help people. It's like you're looking for opportunities to connect because you're like, okay, well, all these people have something to offer. What do I have to offer? So
Right.
a lot of changing of information and just like I've connected with a bunch of people. People have been on the podcast, from John Maxwell. So yeah, man, all of those great things.
Yeah. See, I like that. Excuse me. I like that because my experience was very similar. Um, I've been to, I would say, prior to that, maybe three, four different conference style events, galas, what have you. And I would tell you that that is the one place, and you use the word that I was looking for, authentic, right? That is the one place where I felt that people in the room were actually genuine. They really wanted to see you succeed. They really wanted to see you like take, where you are, go from where you are to where you want to be. And I would tell you, and I say that to say this, it is very difficult to find an environment like that. Let alone to create an environment like that, because you got to realize most people come into an environment like, what can I get out of it? What's about me? What about me? What about me? But when we were in that environment, and you and I went two different times, but when I was in that environment, it was like people was like, how can I help you? Like, what are you working on? Like, do you want to practice your pitch with me before we get in there and you have to do your live pitch? It's like just like stuff like that. And for me, it was just like a breath of fresh air. It was thoroughly something that I thoroughly enjoyed. And like you created relationships, and some of you guys seen you guys see him show up every now and then. My man with the way the top hat, the brim, you know what I'm talking about? Um, no, I did a podcast.
Rolling.
No, not rolling. I did I did a podcast a few years ago. And
Okay.
he does a lot of fitness stuff. And so he is like one of the many people that I still keep in contact. We don't talk every day, but we talk periodically because I still look to some of these people as mentors. And I think that's one of the benefits from being in an environment as such. And that's really one of the things that made me want to create an environment like we're creating as well. So I just kind of want to ask that as we kickstart. because I want that to be the lead into the first question. Now,
Ray, hold on real quick though. You made a good point. You said something that was really, really key in what you said. And that's why I wanted to pause. Initially when I went in, it was only about what I could receive. That was the whole goal. That was the only goal because I didn't know anybody there. I was like, I'm going here to learn, to get this certification, and that was it. But as time went around and I started looking, I was like, how can I help this person? You know what I mean? I started seeing some of the value and some of the things that I had and some of the things I was working on. And I was like, well, how can I help somebody else? And one of the things was just simple. I was doing podcasts already and I started talking to somebody and then I eventually helped somebody else launch their podcasting. So well, it wasn't yeah, but not you. I didn't I met you. We was already doing it with you, I think. Yeah, I was already doing it with you. No. Yeah.
I was doing an audio version.
Okay.
We met before you went, and I was one of
Okay.
the people that you talked to because you said you wanted to know whether it would be a good thing to do.
Yeah.
Like how that work with us.
Yeah. Yeah, man. So yeah. But yeah, it was because I went there looking only to receive because I didn't know what it was about. I didn't know that there was going to be an opportunity for me to help other people as well and to connect with other people and maybe be um a a touch point for someone else.
Yeah,
So I'm glad you said that.
yeah. So just in case, and I wasn't going to share his name. I thought you knew who I was talking about, but the brother name I was talking about earlier was Ken Rick, right? Because I
Mm.
joked with him when we was talking. His name is Ken Rick Lynn. Um, Tonight's conversation will be centered on this book, John Maxwell, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. Now, there are certain things, we're just going to talk about the book, like certain things out of the book, and we're just going to discuss our own perspective from it. And I will be transparent with you guys up front. There are only about 5 laws that we're going to talk about if time permits. And the first one is going to be the law of the lid. The second one is going to be the law of influence. The third one is going to be the law of navigation. The fourth one is going to be the law of addition. And if time permits, we'll do the law of intuition and then get into some true and false. So, that said, I want to kind of just toss the first question out at you, bro. After we talked about all of that, in what ways can leaders live now? And I'm gonna read something before you answer this question to give you a little time. In what ways can a leader's lid restrict the growth of their team or organization, and how can this be mitigated? Now, as we're talking about the law of the lid, one of the things I want everybody to understand is that the law of the lid states that a person's leadership ability is the lid that determines their level of effectiveness. In other words, the lower an individual's ability to lead, the lower the lid on their potential. Conversely, the higher their leadership ability, the greater their effectiveness and potential impact. So, with that being said, bro, what are your thoughts on this question?
Let me take it off mute. I think one of the things it can do, it can um sometimes what leaders will do, they won't trust. I think sometimes they won't trust their subordinates. And then what they do is they kind of create a culture of micromanagement and always like looking over their subordinates work, and it's because they don't trust them, because their lid is restricting. It's like, well, this is how we do it and this is the way it's supposed to be, not always listening maybe to other ways of doing things. And I think that can be a restriction. And I think, one of the ways that it can be mitigated is just having an open, not necessarily too open. I understand dictatorship and I understand do as I do, because the mission needs to be accomplished. But I also think that there's other ways of doing it too. And sometimes just creating a culture of, openness where people can share certain information may be okay and may prevent or may help mitigate some of this stuff.
I do like that. As I'm listening to you, I'm reminded of kind of like the army's perspective of leadership, and I get the privilege to teach that. to captains and lieutenants when we start talking their doing their leadership block of instructions. And I always start off from big picture and bring it down because I want people to understand, you know, um, why the leadership model is the way it is and how effective it can be. And I always start off by letting everybody realize that the Army is a profession for one reason and one reason only, and that's because it has a code of ethics. In fact, every profession has a code of ethics. In human services counseling, it's like 42 different codes of ethics that governs your behavior and governs how you interact with your clients. And so under that code of ethic, that's the thing that gives them the right to call themselves a profession. And under there, you have five different pillars. And those pillars are honorable service, esprit de corps, military expertise, trust, and I can't remember the fifth one right now, but it's five of them, right? So that is what everybody in the Army is supposed to be, right? They're supposed to be experts. They're supposed to be trustworthy. They're supposed to be experts in their craft. They're supposed to exhibit honorable service, and they're supposed to experience. They're supposed to create an environment where esprit de corps or the winning spirit is existing and live. I think I just found the five one as I was talking through it. But then up under that, you have these things in which we counsel every soldier in, and that's called the Army values. Now, the beautiful thing about it is that as soon as they come in the Army, they start having to learn these things. You have to recite the Army values. You have to recite the Army creed. You have to recite the soldier's creed. You become a non-commissioned officer, you got to recite the NCO creed. So in essence, it goes from the conscious memory to your subconscious memory. First, you start off trying to memorize it, then it becomes ingrained in you. I bet you if I was to ask you right now to recite the first stanza of the non-commissioned officer creed, you'll probably jump to the position of attention and say, "No one is more professional than I. I am a non-commissioned officer, leader of soldiers," right? Because that's the thing that we did, and over time, you really started to believe that to where you felt it in your core. And I think that's the key here when we start talking about a leader's lid. If you do not ever get to the point of doing your job as a leader to from the standpoint of the core of who you are and then elevate that based upon a character trait, then the only thing you're going to end up doing is like what Lisa said here in the chat, and you're going to impose your limitations on your team because, like you said, you'll become a micromanager. You will start to question because now, because of my own limiting beliefs, I gotta, I'm thinking you're trying to do something underhanded. You're coming for my job. I feel threatened by your existence because of how smart you are, how skilled you are, and things of that nature. So, in my mind, when I see this question, all of these things come to mind because not only, I can think about it, but I actually witness it in real time throughout the so many years of existence I've been in.
Yeah, man, I get that. I've worked for all types of leaders, and I've I've been an evolving leader over times. How I was as a sergeant was different than staff sergeant was different than sergeant first class. And right now on my job, I don't have a per se leadership title, but I think some people do still look at me as a leader in certain aspects and stuff like that. It's interesting how leadership just changes and evolve over time. I remember one big key thing was that I learned. I think E5. I could tear a soldier down with the best of them, man. Tear that joker down, smoke him. I mean, make him feel like he ain't nothing. And then I had an old, probably a sergeant major. I think we was just talking in general, just about stuff, and he had shared with me a story that he had learned about the same thing. And it was, he said, "Yeah, man, I used to turn him down with the best of them. I smoked soldiers to get into Joe." But he was like, anybody can do that. He said, but can you walk away from that soldier and that soldier learn something from whatever lesson you was trying to teach him by just smoking them? And I was like, well, ain't nobody teach me that. I just seen them get down and do some push-ups. I
Right.
didn't see the behind that the NCOs were talking to soldiers sometime and sharing with them information that would make them better once they left that smoking session or once they left that discipline or that corrective soldiering era. So just add the 2 cents.
No, I mean that was a great 2 cents. Because I'm agreeing with you. When I first, started progressing, I seen what people did, and it was almost like straight knife hand, blunt force trauma, front lean arrest position move.
Yep.
And it's like, man, I can't wait to pin my stripes on because that's what I'm gonna do. And
Mhm.
literally,
And
that's what
that's
I
what we
did.
did a little bit.
Yeah, that's what I did until I learned better. And then I
Uh-huh.
went from that to getting to the point of like talking and trying to understand why the soldier did what they did and what would they think about in real time. Now go back and do it again and do it better.
Yeah. And
And
I
that to me kind of helped me evolve. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I think I brought that up just to let people know that your leadership can evolve over time. The way you thought about leadership and your roles and stuff at one position, as you evolve and get older and learn from past things, your leadership is going to evolve. You're going to become better at it. You should become better at it.
Absolutely.
Should.
So I'm gonna go a little off the rails here. We're gonna hit the next question here in a second. But
Hmm.
for everybody in the chats or anybody who's listening, like I want you to kind of like do a scale. It can be a scale from 1 to 5 or 1 to 10, whatever you want to do, and make 5 or 10 like the pinnacle of what your leadership lid is, right? Like
Mm.
if you can think of what the highest of your leadership lid is, just kind of give that a title, and then find the middle ground, either it's 5 or 3, and give that a title, and then find the lowest ground and give that a title. Then I want you to kind of identify where you are, just as a self-reflective thing. You don't have to share it. Just want you to kind of consider what your lid is from your own perspective, because I'm gonna give you something later to kind of validate that. Okay.
Mm.
So that moves us on to the next point. Again, for those of you who are joining us late, we're going over some of, a few of the leadership principles, a few of the leadership laws out of the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership. And if you do not have that book, I invite you to go get it and buy it, especially if you are a leader or an aspiring leader of any sort. So, first and foremost, let me give you the law of influence first. The law of influence states that the true measure of leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. If you cannot influence others, you cannot lead. Leadership is not about titles, it's not about positions or flowcharts. It is about one life influencing the other. So, that said, what are key characteristics that make someone influential, and how can these be developed over time?
This is a good one. I like this one. I had one, but I think I'm going to add to it. I thought initially that this person, one thing that a leadership needs to have, one characteristic is effective communication, right? But as I started reflecting back on what we was already talking about, especially with me and you, especially as like being an E5, I think effective communication, and I've added in a little bit of empathy along with that, right? Because it's one thing to have effective communication, but when you add empathy in there, I think that goes a little bit, it can go a little bit deeper. Now, sometimes depending on what we're talking about or what the communication is about, empathy may go out the window. Sometimes I may just need you to charge the hill, and that needs to happen. However, um, with the communication piece and it being effective, anytime you're getting information from one person to another, whether that be influence or whatever, the communication needs to be effective. If communication is trash, it's not going to work. You know what I'm saying? So you're trying to talk to somebody about A, B, and C, but they don't understand it, or you can't relate to them your point in a way that they can receive it or understand it. So I want to start by just, saying effective communication and adding in a little bit of empathy with some of the effective communication that you have. Um, and I think that's where I'll start.
I like that. Um, because one of the things that I find myself saying quite frequently is that the biggest mistake that we make when it comes down to communicating is believing that it actually happened. And a lot of times you'll hear people say, I want you to do what I imagine you doing when I told you to do what I asked you to do. No, it don't work that way. You have to paint the word picture to such a degree that they clearly understand, then solicit feedback from them so that you can understand that they understood what you were saying. That's the other side to it. So, in conjunction with having the ability to articulate your words and thoughts in a clear, concise manner, you also need to be listening and requesting feedback based upon what it is. So that other person has to be actively listening to what it is that you're saying. They're not preoccupied with something or whatever. I want to go back and kind of expound on one of the things I talked about previously, because one of the key characteristics that makes someone influential, I'm going to go back to the Army model because they say the bedrock is trust, right? What I am going to say, not just trust, but being trustworthy, right? You're the people who you are leading, whether you're talking about, your employees, whether you're talking your family, whatever, they need to be able to see that you are a person of character, which means that if I commit to a thing, I follow through with the thing. If I do a thing, I do not stop until I finish the thing. If I say I'm going to do the thing, then that's what they can put their money on and bank that I'm doing it. So being trustworthy, I think, is one of the biggest things because it kind of gives them permission to relax. It gives them permission to be authentic and not be on guard when it comes down to your existing in space with them. Now, again, I think it's a challenge because when we look at some of the limiting beliefs that people have, it's easy to be guarded. It's easy not to trust a person. It's easy to exist in a space to where we say, I believe it when I see it. And so what we do is we take faith off of the table because I need to see it first for me to believe it. So being a trustworthy individual to me is the gateway of being influential, because when people look at you, and I'm gonna go back to the word that you said previously, when people look at you, when they see you, when they hear you, your as some people tend to say, your audio lines up with your video. So the words that you speak exhibit who you really are. They're just not beautiful, clearly articulated words with cursive writing, cursive speech, right? There are words that actually mirror who you actually are. And here's the reality of the truth. Sometimes we got to recognize in the midst of what we're doing, we have to self assess. We have to look at ourselves, look in the mirror, and say, am I living up to the words that I preach? But then here's the other side. Some people have a skewed perspective of who you are anyway because of their background, because of their limiting beliefs. So you need some trustworthy people in your corner that will be honest and transparent with you and tell you the truth. Not people who you can clearly identify have a limiting belief, because they're going to give you their version of the truth, which really comes through the lens of their limitation. So the trustworthy thing to me is really where the rubber meets the road. If people cannot view you as being trustworthy, then why would they open up to you? Why would they actually be that person that they need to be around you?
Yeah, I'm listening. And I also had an extra thought that went along with this, right? So the question was influential, right? That makes someone influential. Now, this can work on the other side as well. So there's a negative side of this too that I just want to highlight, because a lot of us spend a lot of time, a lot of people spend a lot of time on the internet, and they're looking at very influential people. You're looking at people who have 1 million, 2 million, 5 million, 7 million on up followers, and they are doing something, right? And sometimes their communication is very effective. And sometimes those communications that get you to buy some course that ain't really good for you. Some of them will get you to buy something, or buy something that you really don't need, because they're very influential, and they got that gift of the gab. So I just wanted to highlight that there's the other side of that too. And I think that kind of goes in hand with the trustworthiness of what you just talked about. That's
Right.
what made me think about that. You know, does this person present themselves as a trustworthy person? And like you said, um that's a very, in beginning thing to get to the next level. You gotta Does that person present them well in a trustworthy fashion? It is a very great point.
I'm glad you said that, because a lot of times we want to believe is we really want to believe that leadership is pointed toward positivity. It's pointed toward goodness. But history has shown that that's not always a good thing. That's not always the truth, right? We look at, people throughout history to where they had a lot of followers. They had a lot of people who believed in what they were saying, but I hate to use the term that they were evil people, but there were people who were doing things that appeared to be evil to other people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we got to realize that when we start talking about leadership, when we start talking about influence, it's not a good or a bad thing. It's really nebulous. It is what it is. But we
Mm-hmm.
have to realize that it takes a certain amount of skill that actually that we get to, that we start harnessing to where we get to the point to where we start influencing other people to do a thing, to be a thing, and so forth and so on. So yeah, I like
Coats.
the fact that you brought that up.
Think about coats, bro.
Who?
Coats. A coat.
Oh
Think
yeah.
about a
Oh, yeah,
cult
yeah, yeah, yeah.
leader.
I got you. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Think
Yeah,
about a
I get
cult
it.
leader. Like they get, people drinking the Kool-Aid, all of that stuff. Like there's some very influential people who have sent people right to the grave.
Yeah,
Our parents, our aunties, our grandmas, a lot of people are very, very influential in our life. And a lot of these people are leaders in our community,
yeah,
just for the record, So how do they present themselves? How do they live their lives? Are they trustworthy people? So
yeah. And I think, and I might be getting ahead of myself. I think if you are a leader of any sort, like there has to be a level of responsibility that you accept when it comes down to the people that you lead. Like those, like you have to be protective of those people. But one of the first lines of defense is I got to protect you from me. So that means I got
mhm.
to keep my ego in check at all times. If I can't keep my ego in check, then I'm only thing I'm going to end up doing is abusing the people that follow me. So we have to be consciously aware of what we're doing in real time when it comes down to it. And I apologize. I thought you said coach. And I was like, huh?
Oh no. Coach, I talk funny.
No,
Bro,
man, you good.
I,
You good.
and I don't think people understand like being, and that's kind of what I said at the beginning. Like being a leader it's a huge responsibility. You know what I mean? I think sometimes people who are not in leadership positions, just they never understand. They kind of take it for granted because as a leader, you have to look out for everybody else and yourself. You know what I mean? As a platoon sergeant, you got 40 people up under you. It ain't just about you. You have to make sure that everybody that's in up underneath your leadership is doing okay.
Yeah.
And that's a huge responsibility. And it takes a lot of bunch of different things in order to be an effective leader. Because I don't think it's a lot it's a lot more easier now. But man, if I go back and look, man, leadership is hard.
Well,
Like
it's easier for you now because you've
now,
learned all the lessons that
oof,
you needed up to this point. But back then, you was listen,
hard.
you listen, you was in
Mm,
that boat riding the white the rapids throughout
yeah,
it, and then you had to lead those people. So you're learning and they're learning in real time, and then there's a friction point of frustration that we always
yeah,
have. So I am learning, and you're asking me questions, and it's cold outside, and all of us sleeping in the woods, and you're screaming that you're cold as though I'm not experiencing the same cold.
yeah.
And then I got to hear the commander. Yeah. So le-
In
you,
life.
you can't vent down.
Yeah, exactly. I still got stuff going on too.
Yeah.
Joe, like, oh, sorry, Mark, I got this going on. Me and my wife, we arguing, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, man, I'm arguing with my wife for the last 3 days.
Right.
Like, but I can't sit there and vent and tell them that. And then as you go up, it's less people to talk to and vent to and have a conversation with. You know what I mean? The stuff
Absolutely.
that men, me and my wife arguing about as an E7 is different than Joe, what Joe arguing about as an E2. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
They ain't shoot, man. I ain't even going down there.
And that's an important thing because the minute that I start venting down, my
Mm,
influence changes.
yep.
That's the thing you have to keep in mind because we're not derailed. This conversation has not derailed not one bit. We're
Mhm.
still on task.
Yep.
The minute I start venting to my soldiers, then my influence just changed because now they start seeing me differently. Now, somebody over here said, well, yeah, they're seeing that you're human. Well, it's not that they didn't see me as being human before. They're now starting to see me on their level. Once they
Mhm.
start seeing me on their level, they're going to start responding to me and treating me differently and things of that nature. So we got to be careful. You don't vent down, you vent laterally, right? I vent to my
Mhm.
peers. We have secret conversations to
Yep.
where, yeah, man. So look, man, this is a little, we got to find a way to figure this out so that the soldiers don't get to experience the brunt of it. So this is that venting is not just griping and complaining.
Yeah.
It's hey, if you're experiencing something, come to me Let me be an outlet for you so that you can be better for your soldiers or for your subordinates when you go back out there amongst them. That's what I'm talking about. And
Yeah.
we got to be careful because it's too easy to get caught up in the complaining bubble. When you start
Hmm.
complaining, your whole something changes. I
Yeah.
can't stress that piece enough.
Yeah. I'm okay with venting, but when I vent, after a few minutes, I'm looking for a solution.
There you go.
You know what I mean? I don't want to just vent all day long. Like I'm trying. All right, let's. It's off my chest now. How can we prevent this? So how can what is the solution to this? So
Right.
that's where I'm at now at 48 versus at 28. Oh man, getting on my nerves, man. These freaking jokers, man, they don't want to do nothing. Now it's like, hey, look, man, I got a problem with Joe over here. This was going on in his life. What can we do? What are some things that you've worked on in your platoon to where you can help me deal with Joe? So that's how the conversations ended up as we moved and progressed throughout the ranks and stuff and leadership in general.
Absolutely. Okay, and great point, bro. My cousin in
Cause though,
yeah, cousin. I think he's still in Kempner, Texas. He made a great point over here on Instagram. He said that's what NCO and officer clubs were used for in the past. Absolutely, we had our own space to where all we had were NCOs, and we can sit down and have a beverage and talk with one another and share some of the challenges that we're experiencing, and then they can share ways that they're overcoming those as well. So I love that point that
yeah,
he brought to the table. Thank you for sharing that, bro.
yeah, man.
So the next one is all about the law of navigation. Now, the law of navigation states that anyone can steer the ship, but it takes a leader to chart the course. Leaders who navigate do more than control the direction in which they and their people travel. They see the whole trip in their minds before they leave the dock. So, that being said, how can a leader balance short term challenges with long term goals when navigating their teams? Now, I kind of, put you out there before. I'm going to take this one first, and I'm gonna let you relax for a second, right? Um, when it comes down to short-term challenges, we have to recognize that the short-term challenges never changed the long-term goals. It's easy to stay hyper-focused on the challenges. Some of the challenges that we experience in real time, it can look as though it gather a lot of our attention. Some challenges aren't even worth our attention. So first, we need to analyze the problem that we're experiencing. Is this problem requiring the significant amount of resources to derail what we're currently doing? Or can I just slice off one or two people to take care of that challenge? Can I slice off 1 or 2 hours to take care of that challenge? Does this challenge create an opportunity for us to get to our long-term goals at a faster rate? That's one of the reasons why, and I hate to keep using the Army, but we've got a lot of experience when it comes down to the Army. In the military decision making process, you create this elaborate plan after analyzing the problem set. So, in the end, this is what we're going to do. This is what the goal is. However, in the midst of executing that plan, a situation may arise. Now, that situation arise, we call it can create a variance, which means that if this is the course that I'm traveling for that plan, then now when something shows up, it may make me want to steer left or right. If I steer right, it gets me to the point to where I can expedite getting to the goal faster because I can make decisions in the midst of this challenge that actually leapfrog us ahead in time. Or if I steer left, then it could do just the opposite. So we need to be able to analyze these challenges. And one of the ways that we do it is that we create like risk management. So we create a risk management matrix that says if the problem set looks like this is what we're going to do. If it looks like this is what we're going to do. So now we're getting into thinking about what potential problems can arise, right? And then if that problem arises, this is what happens, which means that if that's the case, I need to allocate a person to look for the signs and symptoms. So if that problem starts to appear that it's going to show itself, then you be like, hey, wait, I'm seeing the things that say that this problem is probably more likely than not. And so then we start preparing for this short term challenge. So when we start looking at the overall plan, we have to understand the overall plan and then have a risk management plan so that we can manage the challenge when it presents itself so that the challenge does not derail the entirety of the long term plan that we created. I've said a lot, and I don't want to steal anything that you want to say. So I want to pause right there and let you kind of add.
Um, so my ad is, how can a leader balance short-term challenges with long-term goals when navigating their team is they have to be flexible. In the midst of a long-term goal, there are going to be a lot of challenges that come up. And with that, you're going to have to prioritize certain things over. Like you said, one thing it may not even be worth talking about or dealing with, so that may go down to the low priority end, whereas something else we may move to the front of the list because it may help us, with the long-term goals. So I think, just initially, the flexibility, man, like I remember, go back to the military, when we have to deploy, and we know a year out, 9 months out, 10 months out that, hey, look, we're going to Iraq or we're going to Afghanistan and we're going to be gone for 15 months. Well, when that when you find that out until the day that you leave, that we leave, it's gonna be a whole bunch of short-term challenges. Somebody gonna get pregnant, somebody gonna get an Article 15. I'm just saying, somebody gonna try to PCS. It's a whole bunch of negative things. And then what happens when sometimes those things happen, it puts more pressure on the other members of the team. So as a leader, you have to try to balance those things out because things are going to come up. And that goes back into being more, you have to be flexible. You have to understand that challenges are going to come up. You have anything long term, challenges are going to come up. Let's take leadership. Let's take our marriage, right? Challenges are going to come up as we try to get to the long term goal of being together forever, So, um, having flexibility is key, and being able to prioritize the different things that you got going on, prioritizing some of those short term challenges
Yeah.
I think are key.
Yeah, I like that. One other thing I want to add to it as well is that a hyper emotional leader makes the team nervous.
Mm,
So the leader needs to understand emotional. They need to understand emotional control. They need to have some degree of emotional intelligence about themselves. They need to be able to calm the team down. Just because the what if is currently happening in real time, that's not a time for us to get hysterical and start running around with our hair on fire. No, calm the noise, right? Get everybody to sit down and think, process what is actually going on. What are you responsible for? What are you responsible for? What are you responsible for? Let's be honest. If the server just went down, I don't need to throw the whole team at the server. I need to send the IT team to handle the server. That's it. What is the plan? What plan did we come up through? Did we have a backup server? You see what I'm saying? All those things should have been discussed prior to. If we did, that in turn is a comfort level for the leader because this is something that we plan for. Calm down, relax. It'll be up in about 2 to 3 minutes. Make sure if you on a laptop, you're still running off battery power, start backing up your stuff right now. That way, just in case if it goes a little bit longer than anticipated, then that way you don't lose anything that you're working on, right? The generator went out, stuff like that we should have planned for. So that's what it is. So the leader has to display a degree of emotional intelligence so that they can calm the masses so that they're not hysterical when it comes down to these things. Um, and again, just the wherewithal, knowing exactly what the risk management plan looks like in the midst of things, that helps a lot as well. So all great points, and I greatly appreciate that. Listen, before we go any further, I want to make sure I tell you guys we greatly appreciate you guys for being here, regardless of what platform you're on, whether you're on Instagram, whether you're on Facebook, whether you're on LinkedIn. Please hit the like button, the algorithm like the like button. If you're on different platforms, please, just leave a comment, say something, say hi at a minimum. That way the algorithm picks that up as well. Okay. Moving on, man, time is moving, bro.
I know, right? I was like, damn, we already 45 minutes.
Yeah, we got to get some true false as well. All right, moving on.
Oh,
Next is the law of
yeah.
addition. Okay. The law of addition states that leaders add value by serving others. I'm going to say that part again because I think that that is key. And that's one of the things that is missing in the realm of leadership. Leaders add value by serving others. Great leaders recognize that their success is measured by the value that they add to the lives of those they lead. By focusing on adding value to others, leaders build trust and respect, which in turn fosters a more collaborative and productive environment. That being said, what are some common obstacles leaders face when trying to add values to others, and how can they overcome them?
Bro, I got one of the biggest ones that I think freaking time. Man, time, and I'm gonna add in that prioritization again on this one, right? And I'm gonna use that long term goal of deploying. It's if I am trying to get the unit or my platoon from here to there, right? There's a lot of things going on, a lot of things going to happen between in this 9 months, right? And soldiers want to go to the promotion board. It's a lot of stuff going on. And I'm not going to have time to do everything. I'm not going to always have time to pull Private Dwyer to the side and have a talk with him for 5 minutes or 10 minutes about something else that he needs to really work on. You know what I mean? So I think when you have limited amount of time that you have with your subordinates, depending on what the mission is, I think sometimes we can overlook the fact that we still need to be inputting into our subordinates. You know what I'm saying? And adding value to them. But we it's hard sometimes. You know what I mean? I'm just speaking as as somebody who did 20 years and had, different leadership positions. And, there was something that cause everybody when we get promoted, when we in PLDC, what I mean? We E4 promoted when we sitting in PLDC, that's a leadership course. And we're like, man, we get on fire. I was like, man, when I get done with this and I graduate and I get in it turned 10:59, it's gonna be like, man, I'm gonna be good to go. And it's like, I want to take care and help all the soldiers. It's like you like, man, you so on fire. You like, I ain't gonna be like that soldier right there. I ain't gonna be like that NCO. I ain't gonna be like him. I'm gonna be better than that. And when I get back to my unit, man, I put on them stripes, man. I'm gonna be there. I'm gonna add value. And I'm gonna help these soldiers get promoted. I'm sending them to the board, and I'm gonna work on their PT. We do all of this stuff, right? And then all of a sudden, we got challenged in this and this and this and this, and you realize that, man, where's all of this time I'm going to have to input all of this stuff that I want to into my my subordinates? And sometimes it's hard. So for me, I know I kind of went for a little bit, kind of got on my soapbox a little bit, but man, prioritizing that freaking time, man, is really a big challenge, that you got to kind of overcome. And the end of the question said, how can they overcome it? Man, you got to find time. You got to make time. I know I said, having a 10 or 15-minute conversation, but sometimes you may only have 2 minutes. Say, look, Private Dwyer, look, boom, 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 boom. You got it. Look, here, you know what else I need you to do? Hey, I need you to do this. Next time I say I need you to back brief on what I just told you, right? So now you put some pressure on him to kind of learn as well. So that's a way to do it. Because you ain't always got 15 minutes. Sometimes you may only have 2. So trying to find time to add value. You muted.
I can relate. Everything you just said, man. When I first got promoted to Sergeant E5, man, I just knew I was going to be I was going to be the next Audie Murphy. I was going.
Oh, absolutely.
I was about to rehabilitate every soldier in the chain of command. I love this question, and here's why. Because the answer, from my perspective, is not such an obvious answer. But when I give it, it's a real obvious answer. What are some common obstacles leaders face when trying to add values to others? Is first thing first, they think that what they're doing is adding value to others. So what they really have to do is recognize that they may not have done the most important thing first before adding value, right? And John says this all the time. No one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. So they miss the most important first part, which is connecting. They don't connect with the people that they're trying to add value with first. They feel that, oh, I'm the leader, I'm the smart one, I make more money than you, you should automatically listen to me because I have the title. And then because of that, hey, let me add value to you. I will never forget, I had a sergeant major tell me one time, say, hey, I'm about to mentor you. I'm like, no, you're not. I literally said it before I knew it, man. It just came out. You're like, hey, come here, Sandro, I'm finna mentor you. I'm like, no, you're not. but he was a whole different he was a whole different MOS. So he couldn't mentor me the way that he wanted to mentor me because he was trying to mentor me for something that was not conducive to what my job was, what my specific skill set was. So he was trying to tell me that y'all need to do this right here. Like, no, that's not what my career map says. That's not what I'm supposed to do. That's not what my sergeant majors are telling me. Right. So it's stuff like that. So if you fail to connect, you're going to fail when it comes down to adding value. So the biggest obstacle is that they don't take the time to connect with people at such a level that they're open to receiving the value that you're trying to add. So how can they overcome it? Get their ego out the way of the relationship they're trying to have with their subordinates. Once you remove your ego, then relationship can happen. But if your ego is always in the way, your ego will always have you as being the most important person in that relationship. And every time something happens, it always comes back to you. Me. I'm trying to help you. I'm this, I'm that. Whoa. You're not even allowing them to be a part of the relationship. You're telling them how much they're preventing you from allowing you to, to help them. So that's the key for me. They fail to connect, and because they fail to connect, they fail to add value.
I think that's key. I've I've my my middle son, he's 22 now. He's in the army, and I always knew which teachers he didn't have a good relationship with because it showed in his work, and he was the child who, when he was growing up, who was very in touch with that part of himself, very relationship oriented, even now. And if he didn't have a relationship with the teacher, it wasn't going to work out well for him. But he was still a kid, and he wasn't able to. He was That's who he was at the time. You know what I mean? So I can definitely understand. Especially in our profession. As counselors and coaches and stuff like that too. That initial 15 or 30 minute meeting is very important.
Yeah,
That's where we're really trying to gauge this connection and see if we can even work together. So the relationship is very key before you get to anything else. I definitely agree with that.
absolutely. I think there was a question that showed up earlier. Um, I may have missed it. There we go. What if in your long-term goals, problems arise where the team starts to feel that your leadership is in void or not effective? So I think the question that he is asking was for the last question that we answered.
Hmm.
So when the problem arises, I think what he's saying is that the team does not feel that the leader is being effective in dealing with the problem.
And I always say, who is the person on the other side who thinks that I'm not leading effectively, and what is your vantage point? Because that's where I want to start with. Because I remember when I was a subordinate, before I made E5, I was like, man, I already wanted to get promoted. They sit around and drink coffee and take cigarette breaks all the time, you know. But when I became an E5, I realized that what they do as a leadership is different. Now there are some things that are very pronounced, whereas someone is definitely um being ineffective, you know. And I think when if hold on, so what if you're long term? So I guess he's speaking from him being in that leadership position, correct? Just to
I'm not
verify.
sure.
Well, that's where I'm kind of looking at it. So I think if you're in that leader position and it's void or not effective, I think you need to go back and do some assessment and kind of see what is not working, and then figuring out a plan to come up with a solution, but definitely to figure out why is it not effective.
Yeah.
That's the starting point.
Yeah, I agree with that. I will also add because he specified long-term goals. And I kind of want to look at this from two perspectives. If this
Hmm.
was a short-term goal question in relation to long-term goal accomplishment, I would say let's tackle the 50-meter target first. Let's get past this. I'm sorry. Let's get over the short-term concern that we're dealing with currently first. Then let's have a conversation so you can give me the facts about how you feel, because just because you feel a particular way doesn't necessarily mean that that exists. So let's have a conversation. So, and I don't mean just me and you in an office. We kind of talked about this previously. Let's have a team meeting, because if you feel this way, maybe other people on the team feel that way as well. So let's have a team meeting and see whether or not your feelings are shared across the team, or is it just you that feel that way? And if you feel that way, I'm still not saying that you're wrong, but what are the facts that validate how you actually feel? Once that comes to the table, then that gives me something more tangible to work on and fix within me. I'm not saying that how you're feeling is wrong. I just need the evidence that supports how you feel so I know where I need to work on. But if there is no evidence to support how you feel, then you made it up. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be funny. I'm being for real. Right. Sometimes we got to realize a lot of times we may feel a particular way just simply because we may not necessarily like the leader. We may not like their leadership style. We may not like the task that they're doing, whatever that looks like. So I think there's a number of different ways that we can look at answering this question. And I think all of them could be a valuable solution and allow both the leader and the team to move forward collectively. So
Yeah.
great question. Man, time ain't waiting on us, man.
I know, man.
You got to keep chopping wood.
Yeah.
You want to jump into true false? Or you want to go after the law of intuition?
Man, let's do the true false.
I knew you was gonna say that. All right,
True false.
listen. We're gonna kind of jump into the true false. We still had one more, but that's fine. Again, if you've never read the book, read the book. The book is outstanding, and make sure that you read the book from a perspective of self-awareness, not judgment. Read it and point it at somebody else. So, first and foremost, question number one: true false? A leader's lid has no significant impact on the team's potential growth.
False. False, false, false. False, false, false.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
What that doesn't need to be
Mm,
explained. We kind of talked about that previously.
yeah.
So let's move on to the next one. True false. Influence is an innate quality that cannot be developed.
False. False. Well, I think that's the thing about, some people say leaders and stuff like that are born. So if that would be the case, nah, I don't, nah, false. I'm
False.
going with false. Yeah, I'm going
Yeah,
with
I
false
got to
on that.
stick with false on that one too.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And I like where you was
yeah,
going,
false.
but we ain't got enough time on the clock
Yeah,
to go after
yeah.
that. All right, next one. True or false? Long-term goals should always take precedence over short-term challenges.
Um, false. But I think there are some situations where it may be true. And let me explain. So
Okay.
I think as a leader, and we're talking about the civilian sector or the military or something like that, you're a boss, you're managing people or something like that. I think it may be false. Um, however, what about when it comes to a marriage, right? So now we're married. So should our long-term goal of wanting to be married forever take precedence over our short-term argument? So that's why I think maybe in a marriage or something like that, or certain relationships, it may be true.
I
But I
see.
do want I when I saw this, I was like, I wanna know what coach has to say, and I would like to know if anybody in the comments has something to say. Because that's just what I think. I think overall the statement is false, but I think with certain relationships, it may be true.
I see what you did there. I think for me, and I think the way I'm gonna answer this is gonna answer your question for you, right? Um,
Mhm,
for me, the term always is the catchphrase. It's not that we ever take the long term goal and say it's less valuable. The long term goal is the long term goal. That doesn't change. That's the
mhm.
focus, right? But in the short term, this thing, if we don't deal with this thing right here, right now, depending upon what it is, it has the potential to derail the long term. So I may need to focus all of my energy right here, right
Yeah,
now, right? This is
yeah,
this is just kind of like the decisive point of the
yeah,
relationship. If we don't throw all of our resources after it and win at the decisive point, then the long-term goal never happens.
yeah,
So I like the fact that in this question that if you miss that one word always, then it just you're gonna
yeah,
automatically say, oh yeah, it's supposed to take. Well,
Mhm.
to a degree, depending upon what that short term challenge is. Because
Yeah.
if we do not answer that call, if we miss that, if we try to sweep it under the rug, given your scenario, you try to
Mhm.
sweep it under the rug, bad news don't get better with time.
Yeah.
So we got to
Especially
make
depending
sure
on what that challenge is.
that's it. That's it. Okay.
Some challenges, depending on what they are, it ain't no gonna be no long term. Ain't gonna be no if and no but.
Do we have any more? Or was that the last one?
Um,
Okay, true, false. Overcoming obstacles to add value requires persistence and creativity.
True. And I think that the creativity part was where I was really thinking about the creativity piece, because when you moving from one thing to something else, it's like sometimes creative opens up a new idea to do something that could be more effective. So that's kind of what my mindset was when I looked at creativity. Um, yeah, that's kind of where I went with it.
Absolutely. We got one more, but we're not going to touch that one because we didn't go over the law of intuition. So that being said,
Okay.
I know that we're at an hour, but we're going to go into our actionable steps.
Man, I'll go first today. Is that okay with you? Or you want to go first?
It doesn't matter. You can go first.
Man, all right. So my actionable advice is, all right. So I would challenge or say do this over the next 7 days. Figure out and look at yourself. Do an in-depth view of who you are if you are a leader, right? As a leader, write down what you think are your best qualities. And then after that, your 5 best qualities. And then after that, write down your 5 worst qualities, or not 5 worst qualities, or 5 qualities that you think you need to work on. That's it. Just write them down and become self-aware about those things. Now, later on, maybe we'll get to something else that'll go back into what you do with those 5 things. But for right now, just want you to be self-aware of 5 things that you think you're good at, and then 5 things that you think you need to work on. That's my actionable advice.
I love it. I love it. I'm gonna be a little bit more in your face tonight, right? I love you guys. I want to start off by that. If you have never read this book and you want to lead of any sort, I don't care if you want to be the leader of an organization, whether you want to lead your own company, if you have a family and you are a leader of your family, read this book. I'm gonna start there. Based upon this conversation tonight, I want you to go back and listen to this video. And I want you to start looking at yourself through the lens of this conversation. Look at yourself through the lens of the law of the lid. I kind of told you before, make a chart for yourself. Where do you think your leadership lid is? And then you find people around you that know you well and ask them to rate you on your leadership lid. Do the same thing with the law of influence. Do the same thing with the law of navigation, the law of addition. Like I said, we didn't do the law of intuition, but again, that is another great one to do. Rate yourself and then ask the people that are closest to you to rate you as well. Now, I got it. This might take longer than 7 days, right? If I was you, I would listen to this video at least every day for the next week, simply because there are things that were said during this conversation that will resonate with you today. And then when you hear it again next week, it's going to resonate differently next week. In fact, I will also say that the more you grow, you start hearing things at a different level. So listen to this, start charting, charting for yourself, do some self-reflection on yourself. Come back, reach out to us, look in the show notes. You can see where you can reach out to us and get a 30-minute discovery call for free, right? And what we can actually do is set up a time to where we can actually coach you as it pertains to every law in this book, because that's what we actually do. And I think that would be my actionable step for today. I know it was a lot, but I think it'll be good. Um, bro, you got any last word for the people?
Yeah, man. Definitely tune in next week, 7 p.m. Tuesdays. Same bat time, same bat place. And also this Friday, check out the Empowering Perspective podcast. You know, the Hearts of Men podcast over on Empowering Perspective network. And what else, man? You doing anything else? What else you got going on? You got anything else you need to plug?
Yeah, we actually got tomorrow. So tomorrow's Juneteenth. So tomorrow at noon, we'll actually be doing the Make Money Mastery 2024 because we had technical difficulties Saturday. So I had to reschedule it till tomorrow. So tomorrow morning at noon, Make Money Mastery 2024. Again, it's going to be good. Be on the lookout. What I'm going to do is update the show notes with a new link. If you've already registered, you're still registered. If you have not registered, register on the link that will be in the show notes tonight. Because again, it's free. So why not attend? And we may do a TikTok live here.
We are doing TikTok live, so folks. So we're gonna continue this in about at 8:15. We're gonna be live on TikTok. We're gonna talk about this. We're gonna talk about something different.
I say we keep talking about this. See,
Okay.
Adrian said she wouldn't be upset if we went an additional 15 minutes. Here's what I said.
Okay.
Bring your leadership questions to that TikTok live.
Yep. Yep.
Bring your leadership scenarios, bring your leadership situations, whatever you're experiencing at work, ask them during that TikTok live. Put us on the spot, make us answer your questions.
There you go. We'll see y'all in about 8 minutes. And until then, folks, see y'all next week. We out.